My name is Alison Altoff. I am one of the administrators within the Behavioral Health Division, specifically overseeing the Community Connect program. Again, super excited to have Sarah Hasbargen here from Senka and Josh Williams from Presentation Partners in Housing to give us really vital, important information on housing and self-sufficiency resources in Region 5. I'm a firm believer in, you don't know what you don't know. So, just kind of learning all of the information that we can about the resources that are available to the participants that we serve within all of the programs available to them is incredibly important. So with that, I will let Sarah and Josh get started and do introductions, and then we'll go into all the meat and potatoes, the good stuff.
We'll share the screen here and put in our PowerPoint here. If I can get it. Is that showing up for everybody?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off and get started, and then Josh is going to speak up, but once again, so Josh, if you want to go to the next slide. And so I'm Sarah Hasbargen. I am the Self-Sufficiency Coordinator and Deputy Director at Senka. We are a community action agency. There are community action agencies all across the state and all across the country. But this is a kind of a design and setup that's pretty specialized to Region 5 in North Dakota. So Cass, Ransom, Richland, Sargent, Steele, and Trail counties. So what the information we're going to share today, some of it will apply to the whole state and some of it will be a little bit more local. Josh, I'll kick it to you to introduce yourself.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And thank you everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to be able to talk to you all about what we do here. So my name is Josh Williams. I work at Presentation Partners in Housing here in Fargo, Region 5. My title is an Access and Coordinate Entry Lead here. And just for Presentation Partners in Housing, what we primarily are is a nonprofit here locally that helps with homeless prevention, homeless diversion, and we also have a division that helps with chronic homelessness and stability too as well.
And then I'm just briefly going to talk about Senka. So our mission is all around alleviating poverty and giving people the opportunity to improve and achieve self-sufficiency. So we do have a vision that we want to see a community without poverty where everyone has an opportunity to thrive. Just very briefly touching on the services that Senka provides, we provide Head Start Birth to 5 and affordable childcare for early childhood education. We have a childcare food program that helps reimburse daycare providers for providing healthy food in the home. We have weatherization and home repair program. We have an affordable housing arm that does development and management called RBCDC. And then we have our self-sufficiency programs, which are anywhere from just kind of that emergency, very small response to career coaching, whole family coaching, really strong interventions. So there's more information on our website, and that's not the focus of today, but I wanted to just make sure to touch on that, share that information. What I am going to talk about today is I'm going to talk a little bit more about our system and where it came from, why it was created, and Josh is going to talk more about how it functions today. So across the country, everybody who is a member of what's called the continuum of care originally, way back in the day, this has probably been, my guess would be like 20 years at this point, was required to create some kind of coordinated entry system. In West Central Minnesota and North Dakota, they started to work together and they created a system called CARES. So that stands for Coordinated Access, Referral, Entry, and Stabilization System. So this is intended to be our homeless response system in this service area. Now, the really big important thing about coordinated entry is that it is a coordinated, accessible, and transparent link to especially housing assistance resources, especially those housing crisis, homeless prevention, and people experiencing homelessness those resources. The most important thing about coordinated entry is that it assesses people based on their acuity and not just first come, first serve, who calls the most, who is able to advocate for themselves. Historically, when I came to Senka, and this is no fault of anybody's, this is just how systems were designed at that time, is any provider had to call Senka on Thursdays at 9 o'clock. If you were one of the people that got through, you'd get $300. Then you'd call presentation partners. Some of you maybe remember these days. Then you'd call presentation partners on Friday mornings from 8 to 10. And then if you could get there, then you could get $200. And then you'd have to call Salvation Army, that kind of system. And so we started having a conversation. I was dating I think it's been like 8 years ago now, Josh, 8-9 years ago. We just came together as partners and we were like, how can we do this better? How can we not have to have people tell their stories over and over again? How can we have client-centered process? How can we work together to be partners? That created a coordinated pre-application that we all used. That was just a pre-screen, so we were all asking the same questions. Then that grew into a kind of, people were coming in and doing applications, and we were able to grow it into a calling system, and it's been able to be developed to where it is today. Okay, Josh, you want to go to the next slide, please? So this is a visual of what that coordinated entry system is supposed to look like. So what we want to see through this system is people access services. We want them to be diverted to a self-guided resolution. That would be the ultimate goal. And Josh, I'm not going to get into that too much. Josh is going to talk more about that. But the ultimate goal is if we can divert away from homelessness as much as possible and then prevent homelessness if possible. But then if somebody enters that homeless system, either persons fleeing violence, unsheltered homeless, or those imminently homeless, we're going to do an assessment. We want an assessment if they've been in shelter or homeless for about 7 days. And then we would do assignment and prioritization, identifying the intervention that's most appropriate for that household. So that is the people who are really high need that permanent supportive housing. They are placed in that kind of resource category. That is to be able to hopefully tier assistance to what is needed in the community. The only other thing is sometimes this is obviously a goal, doesn't always work that way. Systems are hard. We all know this. But this is kind of the dream and the goal, is that if this system flows smoothly, we can have a smooth response system. Some of you have maybe ever heard about like that functional zero definition, or having no more homeless anymore. It's very big in the veterans world. What that means is that it does not mean that people don't enter homelessness. It means that when they do enter homelessness, we can rapidly move them through the system to the right kind of service that they need. So that is always our goal. And that is why we don't do these homeless assessments right away, because we want people to self-resolve and give them those resources to be able to do that so that they don't fully enter that homeless system. There's data that I don't have available right now, but it shows that as soon as people do enter that homeless response system, they are more likely to enter it again. So as many people as we can keep away from that homeless response system, that's what our goal is to do. Do next slide. Thanks, Josh. So CARES, and this is just things we've heard over time. What CARES does is it coordinates access to homeless and homeless prevention. It provides an equitable design with the intent to serve those who most need the assistance and to ensure that they receive it. And it uses data and partnership agreements to coordinate services. CARES is not FirstLink or PPIH or Senka. When I'm presenting this right now for CARES, I'm presenting it as part of a partner of a system. So CARES is a system and not around one entity, one person, anything like that. This is our response system. It's also not a one-stop shop for all resources. It is very targeted and tiered to homeless prevention and rapidly moving people out of homelessness into housing. And just to clarify, this is not eviction prevention. So there's a difference between eviction prevention and homeless prevention, because there are people who will be evicted that statistically aren't as likely to enter the homeless system. Um, and then the other thing is, it is not the only way to access housing resources. It's not a like a tunnel. There are several different housing resources that don't go through this process. And it's also not a first come, first serve approach. It is not a trying over and over and over again. It is intended to really target based on assistance available, based on capacity. It's intended to target those most at risk. Next slide. This is just a list of that coordinated entry, these partner agencies. I thought that this could be helpful. Any agency can become a CARES partner agency. The partnership agreement is in this link on the bottom here, the North Dakota Continuum of Care. So like Better Together, for example, you can see they're listed as an auxiliary service provider. Anyone who wants to be a part of this partnership is very welcome to. There's just an agreement you follow to that you're providing those services in that coordinated entry fashion. And I did not, because the screen was too big, there are Community Options as a statewide partner. I didn't get that snipped in here, but that's something to note as well. That's basically what I wanted to cover for coordinated entry. Josh, go ahead and take it away, and then I will just keep an eye on the chat.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Sarah. I appreciate that. It's amazing to be able to talk to you guys today. Just for myself, being a part of the history of seeing CARES grow and all the partnerships that we've made in Region 5 here. It's really a wonderful thing to being able to work with both sides of the river, because we right now are on Region 5. We're talking about Region 5 in Fargo area, but we're also connected with West Central community and with that Minnesota piece too, because Fargo has both sides of the river here that we're addressing. And so when we're talking about that CARES piece to it and what CARES is, and Sarah said it perfectly, it's just it's this community collaboration. And the way I like to talk about it is when I'm explaining it to like my children, for example, when I'm letting them know, like, what is CARES? I like to mention, I have 4 boys, and 2 boys love the DC comics, and then 2 of my boys love the Marvel comics. So I would relate that to them as, CARES is like the Justice League if you're a DC fan, or CARES is like the Avengers if you're a Marvel fan. So it's a bunch of superheroes coming together for the greater good to really use all the resources that we have available. So here in our Region 5, Cass and Clay County CARES, our partners that primarily work with homeless prevention is, well, first we have FirstLink, and they are our front door. They're our phone service. So when somebody does have a crisis, they're able to call 211 and directly get linked to our CARES programs here. We also have the Salvation Army. They're able to provide assistance too with homeless prevention and homeless diversion too. We also work with CAP-LP, also Lakes and Prairies Community Action, and then my agency, Presentation Partners in Housing, and then SENCA, Southeastern North Dakota Community Action as well. What is homeless prevention? So homeless prevention is like any intervention that you would hear when it directly relates to helping with a housing crisis in the homeless response system. Homeless prevention is that intervention that can happen with or without financial assistance. It definitely starts at the inflow, so the start of the homeless response system. So we're trying to prevent the homeless situations from escalating to a homeless situation. It also targets that at risk of homeless crises that happen. So we're able to identify the right at the brink of homelessness. We primarily deal with the evictions. We also do eviction diversion, which is different than eviction prevention. And we also help with emergency assistance. And that's one of the big things is homeless prevention targets the emergency side of it. We're not a more of like a housing program. We're not a long-term, we're not like a housing voucher. We're definitely that right at the emergency side of it. It is also that very short-term financial help if needed, alongside with short-term case management services too. So we do help with the Cass and Clay County, and in Fargo, it's all of Fargo, West Fargo, and then we go from Moorhead to Barnesville. We are targeting low-income households, so they're typically the ones that are, if you're on the Minnesota side, we're trying to target people that are 200% the federal poverty guideline. And then in Fargo, we're targeting the people that are 80% of the area median income. And we're also identifying anyone at risk of losing their nighttime residence. Court evictions are pretty much the common theme when we're talking about homeless prevention. So that includes the court summons for eviction, the 3-day notices to evict, the terminations of leases. It also includes trying to help people with those highest barriers that Sarah was talking about. We do a housing crisis triage on every call that we get to identify those that do have those housing barriers that looks like loss of income or multiple evictions on their records. And it's something that is preventing them from being able to get into another house, and also helping to identify people with that long-term homelessness or chronic homelessness piece to keep them housed so we can prevent them from having another episode of homelessness. So that the housing crisis triage is the primary tool that we do use here, and this is at the access point. So the assessment is for anyone who does apply for any of the homeless prevention services. This can include anybody on any level of the homeless response system that is entering in. It can be somebody that is having a new housing crisis. It could be somebody that is fleeing domestic violence. It could also include somebody that is staying in an emergency shelter already and leaving, or staying in an institution and leaving, or people that are unsheltered and trying to get into housing. We also see people that are currently in housing that are facing late rent, eviction notices, disconnection notices. It doesn't mean that we're able to help everybody, but we do have that conversation, and that conversation starts with the housing crisis triage. So that triage helps us to prioritize those who are at the highest risk and the highest barriers. It also helps us with being able to engage in that conversation for self-resolution, and to be able to help with being able to identify any of the needs in the community that we're seeing too as well. Another important piece that we do and we work with is the landlord in property management. That's a huge piece when it comes to homeless prevention or homeless diversion. We do definitely do the engagement piece with landlords. We do offer that programs, and we promote what we're doing and inform landlords of who we are, how we can help, and how we can build those relationships. We do the mediation between landlords and tenants, and that's a huge piece too, because that can mean the big difference of being able to step in for a tenant, and maybe the communication barrier has dropped, and being able to help facilitate that conversation that may have been lost at some point, to be able to see what it is that we need to do to be able to help either the tenant, the landlord, to make this a successful situation. And then we also help to resolve the debt or what is owed for the landlord or for the tenant, and then to help with that stability piece too. Alongside the financial piece, we also offer the short-term case management piece too as well. These go hand in hand. So when we're working with somebody, we always come up with the housing stability plan. That's to help the participant work on some of the goals that they might need or might be thinking about trying or wanting to try, and help to connect them to the community. So these are really good examples of being able to identify people that may never have heard of any of the programs that are out there. We can step in, we can help them with the crisis, we can help them with having that stability piece, and then we can help them get connected to those resources. Typically, it looks like anywhere from 1 to 3 months of assistance that we're trying to help with. That includes the case management piece. It doesn't always include the financial piece. Sometimes when we do work with a household with homeless prevention, if we're doing the financial piece, it might just be the arrears that is owed to stop the eviction, to keep them in the home, but it also can include a couple of months just to provide that stability too as well. And it's also helping with addressing the initial housing crisis. So that is something that we use when we do the housing crisis tool. We do talk about what happened, and then we discuss the options of being able to fix the crisis, how to prevent the future crisis from happening, just listing any of those goals and working on that stability plan to make sure that they don't have that situation happen again, or to be able to work on those. So what homeless prevention does is it definitely helps with reducing that inflow into the homeless response system. So without homeless prevention, we would have more people entering into the system and going into homelessness. And already we have all of our shelters in our region are always full. There's always a list of people waiting for the beds that are already occupied. So homeless prevention really helps to keep people in their home, and in a way has that housing first approach to it, is to be able to keep them in the home, regardless of if they have income to pay next month, but to be able to help build that plan, promote that stability, and to keep them housed and having to not experience another episode of homelessness or experience homelessness in the first point. And it also helps with other housing programs, helping to keep tenants in their homes when they have housing vouchers. So some people might be waiting for years to get Section 8, being able to keep them in that home, keep their voucher active so they don't lose it too as well. It also helps with that childhood trauma piece, and that's definitely something that we've identified as a big thing that does happen when people fall into homelessness. Is it affects the children that are in the family's home as well. It does definitely disrupt schools. It helps. It does have that childhood homelessness and stability research that we've seen to be able to see that when people do fall into homelessness, there is a percentage of people that have had homelessness as a child. So to help break that cycle that we do see is people having to experience homelessness and pass that on generational. It also helps with homeless prevention with the evictions on people's records. So when you have an eviction on your record, it can be very a huge barrier for people to be able to get into a new place. If you do end up getting evicted and you have previous evictions on your record, the likelihood of finding another rental drops dramatically. I definitely noticed that having an eviction on your record is along the same lines of having almost like a felony on your record. Some landlords won't even consider your application if you have evictions. So being able to prevent those evictions definitely helps with people having that future impact. And then the small amount of assistance that we provide with homeless prevention, whether we're using any of the grants that we're helping with, that definitely helps with the community in the whole, as being able to save them money on the homeless response system. So being able to provide maybe fraction of what it would cost to be able to put somebody into a homeless shelter, to be able to house them in the homeless shelter, or all the emergency services that are connected once somebody does enter into homelessness. So just an example of what I'm talking about with homeless prevention, what it looks like for us. These are just some of the things that I thought of when I was doing this slide is what is a typical homeless prevention application that comes through when we help. So typically we'll see when court eviction is scheduled within 1 week, the stress of having that eviction happens to magnify the already that crisis that they're having. And you definitely see that there's always been some sort of loss of income associated with the eviction. Some people, like a typical one I've seen is they've lost their job 3 months ago. They owe 3 months of rent. Their court is scheduled for the next week. They're living paycheck to paycheck, and maybe something happened where they were sick and they lost a paycheck for 2 weeks. And so that builds up to that crisis. And then some of the solutions that we're able to help identify and help work with is we can set them up with, maybe this is something that homeless prevention assistance can help with. We can do that mediation piece with the landlords to help facilitate a successful result. Sometimes when an eviction starts, it's not just a matter of paying off what's owed. It's also being able to engage with the property managers to see that this may be something that's happening. We're going to help with some solutions, with some stability, and to give that landlord that ability to take a second chance or to be able to consider dropping the eviction to work with the tenant again. We're also able to do that connection to the housing assistance program. So we're doing something that's very short term. We can't help with a long-term solution when we're doing homeless prevention. The program is not set up that way. Like I said, it's typically 1 to 3 months. So we want to be able to look at what we can connect them to, that if they need more assistance after we're reaching our limit, we can get them connected. In the past, what that's looked like is we might have helped somebody get connected with homeless prevention. We've helped them with the crisis, and then we help them apply for Section 8, or even North Dakota Rent Help has been a big thing that we've been able to help people get connected to as well. And then also the job service piece. So there's lots of great things that our partners have here. In SENCA does the workforce piece, it does the whole family piece. So getting them connected to those case managers and those programs and services to build on that stability is super important for us too as well. And then we also look at those short-term resources to help stabilize. Some of the short-term resources might be getting them connected to the county to apply for SNAP benefits. Maybe it's medical benefits. Maybe it's just helping them find those little things that can lead to huge results along the way. So now I talked a lot about prevention, and the other side of what we do here in Region 5 is homeless diversion. So just a little quick rundown of what homeless diversion looks like. It is also an intervention, just like homeless prevention, just like rapid rehousing. But typically with homeless diversion, we're not using any financial assistance associated with that. Homeless prevention does help with that piece where they're needing help with an eviction. Diversion is going to move towards when somebody has lost their house or home or residence. So homeless diversion will work with people. Typically, we can help them get connected to like a security deposit, but that's going back to homeless prevention. Mainly what we're trying to do is connect people to safe living situations. So we come up with these resources and ideas and strategies that fit any of the cases that we're talking about, and we help to get those connected for that person's crisis. So being able to help strategize on the next steps after they've lost their house or their housing, connecting to those alternatives rather than the homeless shelters. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with the homeless shelter. It serves a vital, important piece to the homeless response system. But the truth is that homeless shelters are always full, and it is definitely a lot different than staying in your own residence. There's lots of rules, there's lots of different pieces that are associated with homeless shelters that it might not always work for somebody to be able to stay there. And it also saves those beds for the people that are literally homeless to be able to get connected to the shelters faster. So when we do attempt diversion, that is happening at the front door of our homeless response system. So that's happening when we're doing the housing crisis triage. Like I said, we will see people that come in maybe that are doubled up and they're not able to stay, or they're couch hopping and they've met their limit of how many nights they can stay there. So they're looking at those other solutions. So we're trying to help get people from staying in a safe place and keep them there, rather than having them go to places where they're staying outdoors or somewhere where their safety is at risk. Diversion's trying to attempt to keep people safe. In a short-term situation, it can look like maybe a day, a week, a couple of months, anything that prevents them from having to stay in an unsafe situation or a shelter. So we also attempt it when someone is seeking shelter. So we will have the diversion conversations. It doesn't always happen to be that when we have those conversations, we divert people. Sometimes we're just having those conversations to be able to explore those other alternatives too. And we do not attempt diversion when someone's safety is in jeopardy. So we're not going to try and divert them back into that unsafe situation. It doesn't mean that when we're talking to somebody and they're staying in a vehicle, if we're trying to get them to stay in their vehicle versus a shelter, that's not what we're talking about. Homeless diversion is talking about getting people to stay somewhere safe. So diversion is that conversation that we have with people. We do a lot of active listening. We use motivational interviewing techniques. We also use that problem-solving skills. So we use collaboratively with our agencies, lots of different solutions that, one person doesn't know how to do everything. We definitely use that when we're working together, we're working better for this. We're connecting to resources in the community. We're helping them identify those alternative living situations. Maybe it's getting them back in touch with a family member that they may have had an argument with, being able to step in and maybe mediate the conversation, maybe to help them identify solutions that they never thought of trying before, to be able to see if that would be a possibility. And some of those examples of diversion. So when I was going through this, I came up with just the blueprint of what it looks like when we do see a diversion case come through and what that typically looks like for us as a solution response. So we'll have a household who may have been just evicted just recently. So when you go to court eviction, they typically give you either 1 to 5 days to vacate the unit. And if you don't vacate the unit, then they're able to forcibly remove you from the home. So when we do see those calls that come in, we'll have people that are being court evicted and they have less than that 5 days, 3 to 5 days before they're removed from the home. They may have already tried calling the emergency shelters and have been placed on a waiting list and not given really any time frame of when they might get that call. And then they might also have no income that led to the court eviction, that led to the initial crisis that has happened. So they're not able to stay in a hotel. And if you're also not able to pay your rent, sometimes you're not able to pay for a vehicle to as well. So some people don't even have a vehicle to stay in. And so they're looking at that possibility of staying in emergency shelter as their only solution versus staying outdoors or unsheltered. So what we would do on some of these calls is we go through the housing crisis triage, and we'll work on those solutions. We'll listen to what they have to say. We'll explore what led to the crisis itself. And it may look like being able to mediate with the landlord that had evicted them. I've been very successful to see with our staff here, being able to reverse an eviction after it's already gone through court. It's a very powerful tool to be able to prevent somebody from having to stay outdoors. Being able to step in, have that great relationship with the landlord, being able to explain exactly what we're able to do. And some landlords will be able to work with the agency and the tenant to repair the damages of having that eviction. So we've been able to maybe pay what was owed and work on a stability plan, and then the landlord would re-sign a new lease and let them stay. Sometimes it would look like us connecting to possibly family or friends for that short-term stay. Most people, when you talk to them about those alternative solutions, they might not have any family or friends. Sometimes we go a little bit further and we talk about what had happened previously in their life, maybe that resulted in them having to stay with family and friends and what that looked like, and being able to try and attempt that again. Sometimes it even looks like being able to help facilitate the initial call itself. So I've had calls where we were talking to somebody that they weren't sure if that family member would let them stay with them. And they were just thinking, I'll stay at the shelter, or I'll just stay in my car, or I'll stay outdoors, instead of having that call. So being able to talk them through that and be able to help, maybe I will call the family member for them and communicate to them what the crisis is and explain a little bit of what we need to have as a solution, whether it looks like if the family member can let them stay for a few nights, or if they are willing to help them with a hotel for a few nights. It's very successful once we do try those attempts too as well. And then the other piece is to help connect them to that rapid rehousing or community support. So it might look like being able to do an HPT or get them connected to doing an HPT to be placed in that rapid rehousing list as fast as possible, because those supports can help them as well. And that is my rundown through it. How are we doing on time? I kind of feel like I was flying there for a little bit.
Yeah, you're good. You got plenty of time.
Cool. I know I just gave you guys a whole lot there. Just wanted to open this up for any questions that anybody might be having or thinking about. And yes, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, so if a person is homeless and looking for housing and they give you a call, how long on average do you think it would take for them to get the help that they need, I suppose, or the get housed? How long would that take, do you think?
That is an excellent question. The response that I usually hear, I get that question a lot. So it definitely depends on lots of different variables. One, when somebody is calling in, let's say they're calling into FirstLink, we try to get that response time to be very quick. So FirstLink will answer the call every time somebody calls in. They might have to wait 2 to 3 minutes for the call, but they'll get that call and they'll be able to relay the information to our team. And depending on the situation, if they are homeless, we have different homeless situations that we're looking at, and we prioritize homeless situations by literal homelessness, exiting an institution or emergency shelter. it could be fleeing or attempting to flee DV, and it could be staying doubled up and what that entails. Some people can be doubled up and they could stay with their current situation for an extended period of time. They might not be asked to leave. They could stay for multiple months. Some people that are staying doubled up or couch hopping, it might be they can only stay for another week or two. So once we get those calls into FirstLink, then we are in queue to talk to them. And that response time typically looks like anywhere from 1 to 5 days. So once we're able to contact and have those conversations, we can explore those options and see what intervention might meet the best response for this. So it might look like we're going to get them connected to rapid rehousing. It might look like we're going to connect them to homeless diversion. It might look like we're going to help them with homeless prevention, or we might have that conversation of self-resolution too as well. It just depends on the situation and what the community has for services too as well.
Thank
Josh,
you.
there's a hand up and there's also a question in the chat. So if you want to
Sure.
do the hand up first, then we can do the chat.
Yep, I'll call on Craig.
Hey, Josh. I have a client who is actually, and you kind of covered this just a few minutes ago, but I've got a client who is desperately trying to get out of a DV situation.
Yes.
She was in my office yesterday for almost an hour crying about it, and it's more of a mental abuse than anything. And what we're trying to do is we reached out to rape and abuse. They didn't have any opportunity or availability. We reached out to the YWCA and they were full. What would be my referral process to get her connected to one of the programs that you just outlined?
Yep, that's a great question. And also we definitely have identified that need in our community. It was a need that was in our community for a while, and we weren't not sure of how to approach that. Since we've connected with all the CARES partners and agencies together, we're able to have those different outlets and be able to move somebody through the system faster. So when we do have people that are reaching out, they call FirstLink. FirstLink does a really good job to screen for any of the unsafe situations to be able to immediately respond to those. So we'll set up FirstLink to have 2 conversations with them. One, they will talk about, has there been any unsafe situations that are currently in their that they're currently facing? And then 2, we'll ask them, can they talk about it at this time? And if they are not able to talk about it at this time, we directly refer them to talk to an advocate at the YWCA, at the Rape and Abuse Crisis Center. We also can connect them to the domestic violence hotline for the nation. We can also connect them, depending on what side of the river they're on. There's other resources in Minnesota that can help. We do utilize like Someplace Safe. There's also Cause, and we try to really be able to help them with the quickest response time. If they are okay to talk about their situation, they're still in that unsafe living situation, but they still want to talk to somebody for the housing crisis, then we will move forward with being able to talk to them a little bit further about that with some really trauma-informed care questions on that. So we'll talk to them about the domestic violence, the abuse that's happening, and being able to identify what resources they may have tried already or thought about trying and help them get connected to those pieces too. Sometimes we will be able to do those immediate referrals right over to shelter. We can place them for the shelter beds too as well, or even talk to them about getting one of the HPTs done to be able to help with transitional housing that's especially targeting the domestic violence situations too.
Josh, I'm gonna just kick something in super quick just to give you
Yeah.
a minute because there's
Yeah.
a lot more questions for you.
Yeah.
You all should know, and it's important to know that the inflow very much is higher than the resources available. And so all of this is really what we're trying to do, but Josh would have the data a little bit more, but there are many people that cannot get assistance, even with court evictions, even with homelessness, because the need is so vast. And so that is why we're trying to do a lot of those diversion and things like that. So sometimes that's why there isn't we can say that people could get help in a certain amount of time. And so resources do come into play. So I just want to throw that out there. Craig, I think I kind of cut you off. I think maybe you were going to say something, and then we've got some stuff in the chat for you, Josh.
Sure.
No, that's fine. I was just gonna say that I'm meeting with her tomorrow, so I think when she's in my office, we're gonna go ahead and make that call to 211 and see if they can't get some more information to her and see if we can't do something that's a little bit more critical.
Absolutely.
Anytime she's in a situation where anytime she doesn't want to do something or refuses, they threaten to kick her out and put her out in the street.
Yep. And definitely I would highly recommend just calling 211 with them, or if they feel comfortable calling 211 on their own, but to get connected into the homeless response system, at least to have those conversations.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Josh, so the next question is from Katie. It says our agency is now approved to do HBTs. How would we go about getting added to the meetings when individuals are pulled for vouchers?
So that you would want to connect with the COC. So for Region 5, you would want to connect with Chanel Willer for the North Dakota COC to be able to get connected with the prioritization meetings. It's really important to, because I also help facilitate those meetings too as well for PSH and rapid rehousing, being able to have everybody at the table to talk about that problem solving solutions, to be able to help when someone does an assessment. It's really important to have the assessors there to be able to give us some feedback, to be able to stay in touch, or to be able to give us any updates for the housing participants too.
The only
think
thing
her
I would
email-
add to, oh, go ahead, Allison.
Oh, I think the email is already in there as well that you would put in there, Sarah, for.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that's the email where you can reach out to her. So, and I will say there's, like Josh said, there's a couple meetings where this triage is happening. And so getting invited to the meetings and having those conversations is the appropriate way to do that. Rachel has a question. It says, I know of a woman who was on the house escaping a DV situation who has a dog. Any thoughts on best resources for a person's situation? The only thing I would add before Josh sprinkles his magic on it is what we've done in some cases is there someone else who could take care of the dog in an interim basis, trying to find kind of that temporary placement for the dog. We do hear a lot, it's a therapy dog. I can't have my dog away from me. I know sometimes shelters will allow dogs, so that is still an option, especially if it has kind of that therapy or support dog. Usually my response is we need to fast track housing because there is no kind of like real long-term solution. We run into that a lot with people with pets. So looking more at the housing side of things is what I found really helpful. Josh, add on.
Yeah, no, it is a pretty common thing. It's not common to hear the fleeing DV with also a pet. That is not as common as what I hear sometimes. But just both of those situations combined together, you have somebody that is either attempting to flee an unsafe living situation or has already fled that situation. So I definitely look at those resources that they could get connected to. And I think somebody also mentioned it's not always an option to get connected to a shelter. Like I said at the beginning, shelters are completely full all the time. all year long. So it's not always an option to be able to just get connected there, but it is important to reach out to the shelters to be placed on the shelter bed list. They do prioritize people too as well. And we do look at the housing barrier piece. There could be the emotional support animal that could lead to that there is other things that they're needing to as well. So we want to look at the whole picture itself, and then also identify with homeless diversion. We can't always help with homeless diversion when it is a safety issue. We don't want to connect people back to the unsafe situation. So homeless prevention will look a little different when we're talking to people fleeing DV. And that's maybe looking at those resources, being able to provide that conversation to really go into detail of like, what are the things that we can try? Is there somebody that may be an option that you could have your pet stay with for a little bit while you do stay at a shelter? Is there somebody that could even provide the help to get the shelter animal or the animal into the shelter too as well? So it could look, the YWCA may have a strict policy on you have to have your pets vaccinated or have to have shots updated. So it could look like being able to get them to a veterinarian that might be able to provide that at a low cost, or it could be a family member that can put that cost up front to be able to get the paperwork in line, or even looking at cases where we're talking to somebody that has an emotional support animal, but they don't have documentation of that. So being able to help them figure out and navigate how do you get that documentation to be able to get to that place where you can be there at the shelter with the animal too. Or like Sarah said, is there a family member or is there a friend, somebody you could trust that could take care of the animal? There's lots of different solutions to that. It's just having those conversations with somebody. And it's hard when we're talking to people in crisis. It's hard to find the right timing to talk about those things, but it might not be a good time to talk to them currently, but also provide that opportunity to have that conversation at a time that's better for them. I hope that answered a little bit of it. Those are good questions. I like those. You're not giving me easy questions today.
Kyle, did you have a question?
Yes, there's often misconception, be like, oh, person's homeless. Yeah, send them to the home to a shelter. I know
Yeah.
that you touched up on it, but do you have specific data like, well, there's about 50 beds available, or something on those lines,
Sure.
but at any given time, there's like such a long waiting list. Can you just touch up on that, please?
Yeah, no, it's I don't have the actual detailed numbers of that, but I work really closely with the shelters too as well. I'm very lucky to be in a position where I work with all the different aspects of a homeless response system. So I do see where we're getting probably around anywhere from 400 to 500 people that are entering into our system at the front door. And then we're also seeing that the shelter beds are continuously full. And there's typically a list of anywhere from 80 to 100 people waiting for the next bed for all the shelters. And we're looking at this as for our area, Region 5, we're looking at that both Cass and Clay County because we have emergency shelters in Moorhead and then we have emergency shelters in Fargo. And then to make things even more complicated, we only have women's shelters and then we have men's shelters too. So you have families that are trying to stay together and sometimes having to be placed on a list that's just for like Churches United, where they can all stay together versus separating them. So it's very, yeah, it's constantly this way, and it has been this way for a long time. Our goal with homeless prevention is to help with the inflow. Homeless diversion is to help also with the inflow into the shelter system. And then rapid rehousing is to help get people out of the shelters back into permanent housing as quickly as possible. And then permanent supportive housing is to be able to help people that have tried that system multiple times and need that permanent support. So using all the different resources that we can, it definitely makes an impact. And also having those facilitating meetings where we're meeting and talking about people that are in the initial housing crisis. We're talking about people that are doing the HPTs and waiting for housing, and having those meetings where we're talking about people that are in a wait list for shelters or for housing programs, being able to continually move that needle down to where our homeless response system will look like that functional zero, where somebody has a crisis, because homelessness is not going to stop. People are going to still have housing crises no matter how good of a system you have. It's improving the system to make it move a little bit faster. And it's all the work that we do together with all the advocates, all the support, case managers, everybody working together will be able to get that down to where it happens very rare, brief, or non-occurring.
I can fill in a little bit of kind of old data that I pulled back in the end of 2023. So from January 1, 2023 to November 30th, 2023, over 2,000 people unique individuals entered the HMIS system, meaning that they entered that homeless response system. 441 were on that prioritization list that did that HPT assessment. My research shows there's about 330 shelter beds. But like Josh said, they're very specific and targeted, some of those. But the housing inventory, so there's a housing inventory count that is done through HMIS where they can say like, what is your inflow? And they do a lot of data on this kind of stuff. Region 5's housing inventory shows 44 transitional housing units, which most of those I think are specified for domestic violence. 557 rapid rehousing resources, which means basically we have enough dollars to do 57 rapid rehousing supports, and 222 permanent supportive housing units. So already right there, you can tell that the inflow is way, way, way greater than the resources that are available there. So those numbers they've probably changed, but they're relatively similar to what we've been seeing, right? I mean, Josh, unless you disagree, but.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
And that's why it's super important to be able, it's not even just us, it's what I like to think about is we're all trying these attempts and these interventions. Like anybody can attempt a diversion call. If you're trained on it, if you have that knowledge and at least like that familiarity of how to have a diversion call, it would be great, an ideal system to have anybody that is presenting a housing crisis to be able to do that intervention right there. We definitely, our care system is set up to be able to have that specialized group of people that can have those calls at any day of the week here. So it is an important resource to refer people to 211, but I definitely strongly encourage you to look for the trainings, try new trainings, maybe investigate what diversion looks like, research homeless diversion, homeless prevention, or even give me a call or shoot me an email if you have any questions. I'm definitely loving to answer any of those questions for anybody as well.
Any other questions while we have Josh and Sarah still? All right. I just muted myself. Was I muted that whole time I was just talking?
No.
Oh, I was like, how did I? Oh, goodness gracious. Well, I just put another message in the chat. If everybody could drop their email address in, I'll make sure you guys get the presentation from today along with the contact information for both Josh and Sarah. So that you guys can reach out with any questions you may have. But I appreciate your time today, Josh and Sarah, putting the presentation together. It was awesome. I think any education is super fantastic. So yeah, so with that, if there are no other questions, please put your email address in the chat and I will get you the presentation, and everybody have a great rest of the week.
Thank you very much for having me. Appreciate you
Yes.
guys. Take care.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.